The rumble of a motorcycle engine faded into the distance as James Grizz Griffin eased his pickup truck into the gravel lot of a weathered, one-story bar. The sign overhead, its letters faded and buzzing faintly, read Rusty Spur Tavern. It was the kind of place that had seen better days, its paint peeling from decades of sun and rain, the dim glow of neon beer signs barely visible through foggy windows. A rusted wagon wheel leaned against the porch railing, like some forgotten relic of a bygone time. Grizz killed the engine and sighed. The day had been long and heavy, a weight pressing on his broad, squared shoulders. Hours earlier, he'd stood in the crisp autumn air at a war memorial, staring at the engraved names of soldiers he once called brothers. Men who didn't get to live long enough to sit in their trucks and feel their bones ache with age. His own reflection stared back at him in the rearview mirror, grizzled salt and pepper beard, deep-set brown eyes shadowed by memories most men couldn't fathom. His hands, steady as steel, gripped the wheel briefly before he exhaled and reached for the door handle. A quiet drink and a moment's peace were all he wanted before finishing the drive home. Stepping out, Grizz adjusted the worn olive jacket he always wore, a relic from his service days, military patches stitched onto the sleeves. Each patch told a story: deployments, battles, victories, losses. They were his second skin. His combat boots crunched on the gravel as he approached the front door, his tall, barrel-chested frame casting a long shadow under the dim porch light. The bar was just as he expected, dark, smoky, and smelling of cheap beer and stale cigarettes. A country ballad played faintly from a jukebox in the corner, and behind the bar, a wiry bartender scrubbed glasses with a rag that had seen better days. A handful of patrons sat in scattered booths and along the bar. Most kept their heads down, but a few cast sidelong glances at the door when Grizz entered. And then there were the bikers. The Iron Talons claimed the far end of the bar like wolves claiming territory. 7 of them sat sprawled across stools and booths, clad in cracked leather vests embroidered with the gang's emblem, a silver talon clutching a skull. Beer bottles and half-empty shot glasses littered the table as rough laughter echoed from their corner. At the center of it all sat Bull. He was a mountain of a man, thick arms covered in faded tattoos, a scar carving through his square jaw. His greasy hair hung loose over his shoulders, and his bloodshot eyes locked onto Grizz like a predator spotting prey. Grizz ignored them. He wasn't here for trouble. He crossed the creaky wooden floor to the bar and eased himself onto a stool, letting out a low grunt as he settled in. The bartender approached, wiping his hands on his stained apron. "What'll it be?" the man asked, his voice rough with years of smoke. "Whiskey. Neat." The bartender nodded and poured a generous shot. Grizz took the glass, his large hand wrapping around it like it weighed nothing, and stared into the amber liquid. He sipped it slowly, letting it burn down his throat, and for a moment, the world quieted. But peace never lasts long in places like this. The laughter in the biker corner faded to murmurs, low, sharp-edged voices. Grizz could feel their eyes boring into his back. He didn't react. Years of military discipline taught him not to rise to bait. "Hey, old man," one of them called out. "You lost?" Grizz didn't move. He brought the glass to his lips again, his expression calm, unreadable. "I'm talking to you," the voice continued, louder this time. Another voice chimed in. "Looks like he wandered in from a costume party. You see those patches?" Laughter erupted, rough and mean. Grizz said nothing. His gaze stayed fixed on the rows of bottles lining the bar. Bull's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. The bar seemed to tilt as the biker leader made his way over, his heavy boots thudding with every step. The rest of the bikers watched eagerly, their grins wide. The bartender, sensing trouble, ducked his head and busied himself stacking glasses. Bull loomed over Grizz, his shadow stretching across the counter. "Nice jacket," he sneered, his voice gravelly. "Where'd you buy it? Army surplus store?" Grizz didn't flinch. He set the empty whiskey glass down gently and turned his head, meeting Bull's gaze for the first time. His deep brown eyes were calm but piercing, a look that had once silenced younger men on the battlefield. Bull smirked, clearly unimpressed. "What's wrong, Grandpa? Cat got your tongue?" He leaned closer, his breath hot and reeking of beer. "Or maybe you're just playing soldier like the rest of those weekend warriors." Grizz said nothing. Silence was his weapon now, and it worked. The lack of reaction made Bull's smirk falter, his aggression shifting to frustration. The rest of the bar held its breath. Even the other patrons, men who usually knew better than to get involved, stole glances at the unfolding confrontation. Bull's hand suddenly shot forward, smacking the patches on Grizz's sleeve. "These real, huh? You think this makes you special? I've seen 100 fake tough guys." "Bull," the bartender cut in nervously. "Leave it alone." Bull shot him a warning glare, but the interruption seemed to puncture the moment. He straightened, cracking his knuckles. "Ain't no one telling me what to do." Grizz turned back to the bar, as though dismissing him entirely. "You done?" he asked quietly, his voice deep and gravelly. Bull blinked. "What did you say?" "I said, are you done?" Grizz repeated, his tone even and slow. He lifted his empty glass and tapped it lightly on the bar. "I came for a drink, not a show." The calmness in his voice, steady as a storm cloud, made Bull pause. For a brief second, the biker leader's bravado cracked, as though he was staring into something he didn't understand. Then, embarrassed by the silence, he barked out a harsh laugh. "You've got guts, old man. I'll give you that." Bull stepped back and turned to his crew, spreading his arms wide. "What do you say, boys? Should we buy the war hero another drink? Maybe it'll loosen up his tongue." The bikers roared with laughter, their voices echoing off the walls. Grizz's grip on the glass tightened, but he stayed seated, his shoulders relaxed. The bartender leaned in close and muttered, "You don't owe these guys a damn thing. Just head out. It's not worth it." Grizz glanced at him and shook his head. "I'm not going anywhere." Bull's laughter died, and his grin turned sharp again. "Suit yourself." He turned on his heel, motioning for his crew to follow him back to their table. "Don't drink too slow now, Grandpa. Wouldn't want you to spill." The bikers retreated to their corner, but the tension lingered in the air like the smell of smoke. Grizz sat motionless, staring at the glass, his expression unreadable. In his mind, though, the war drums were starting to beat. He glanced briefly at the cracked clock above the bar. Somewhere out there, his brothers, men just like him, were still together, gathered in mourning. Men who'd bled and suffered beside him. Men who never came home, and he wasn't about to let some loud-mouthed bikers tarnish their memory. The clink of glass on wood echoed as Grizz set his empty tumbler down. His calm demeanor remained unshaken, though he could feel the weight of the tension wrapping around the room like a noose. The iron talons weren't just posturing. Their jeers grew bolder, nastier, as if daring him to react. At the head of it all was Bull, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "Look at this guy," Bull sneered, leaning back in his chair with a smug grin. "Wearing his patches like some war hero. You ask me, those patches look mighty fake. Ain't that right, boys?" Laughter erupted from the bikers, low and ugly, spilling like bile through the room. The other patrons kept their heads down, nervously sipping their drinks or staring at the floor. The bartender, a wiry man with graying hair, glanced anxiously at Grizz as if silently willing him to leave before things got worse. Grizz ignored it all. He sat like a stone, his weathered face set, his shoulders square. Bull wasn't satisfied with silence. He pushed up from his chair and stalked toward Grizz, the heavy thud of his boots loud and deliberate. A hush fell over the bar as Bull came to a stop beside the small table, looming over Grizz like a storm cloud. "Hey," Bull barked, pretending to look puzzled. "Didn't you hear me talking to you? Maybe you're deaf, old man, or maybe you're just scared." Grizz's dark eyes flicked up at him, calm and measuring, as if looking through the man rather than at him. It made Bull's lip curl. Without warning, Bull gave the table a sharp nudge, knocking Grizz's glass over and spilling the dregs of whiskey across the worn wood. "Oops," Bull said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Clumsy me." Grizz exhaled slowly, his hands still resting on his lap, his expression unreadable. The bar was so silent now that you could hear the hum of the jukebox, its song faint and melancholy. The bikers were grinning, waiting for the explosion. But Grizz didn't move. That stillness, that absolute refusal to engage, rattled them. "What's the matter?" Bull pressed, louder this time. "Too scared to stand up for yourself? Or is it that you know you're just a fraud?" Still nothing. Bull bent closer, his breath heavy with beer. Those patches you wear, you don't deserve 'em. I've seen guys like you, pretending to be something you're not. Maybe you bought 'em off the internet to impress people. You ain't no hero. That was when Grizz finally spoke. His voice was low, deep, and carried a quiet authority that sliced through the air like a blade. Have you ever served anyone other than yourself? The question was simple, but it struck Bull like a slap. The smug grin faded, replaced with a flash of anger. A murmur rippled through the room, the bar patrons shifting uneasily in their seats. Even the other bikers exchanged wary glances. Bull's fists clenched at his sides. "What did you say?" he growled. Grizz met Bull's gaze and repeated himself, his voice just as calm. "I asked if you've ever served anyone other than yourself. A cause, a person, something bigger." Bull's face darkened. He straightened and gave a derisive snort. "Oh, you think you're better than me, huh? You think wearing that jacket makes you some kind of saint?" Grizz didn't flinch, didn't blink. "I didn't say I was better. I'm just not you." Bull's nostrils flared. The jab, subtle as it was, struck a nerve. Without warning, Bull shoved Grizz hard on the shoulder, nearly knocking him back in his chair. The bikers hooted, their cheers bouncing off the walls, but Grizz's calm never wavered. Instead, he slowly stood. And when Grizz stood, it was like watching a mountain rise. He was taller than Bull had anticipated, broader too, his shoulders seeming to fill the space around him. There was a quiet power in the way he carried himself, no chest-thumping bravado, just the weight of a man who had seen storms far worse than this one. Grizz's voice dropped to a chilling whisper, but it carried across the silent room. "Careful who you disrespect. You don't know what a man's been through." For the first time that night, Bull faltered. Something about the way Grizz said it, the controlled menace in his tone, made the room feel colder. The bikers fell quiet, waiting for Bull's next move, but the leader seemed momentarily caught off guard. He covered it with a laugh, loud and forced. "What's the matter, old man?" Bull said, but there was a crack in his voice now. "You gonna give me a lecture? You gonna fight me?" Grizz didn't respond. He didn't need to. His eyes said enough. There was nothing Bull could do to rattle him. "Coward," Bull muttered, though it sounded weaker this time. "You're not worth my time." Grizz didn't flinch. He let the insult hang in the air like smoke. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the door. The movement was deliberate, unhurried. He stopped only once, near the exit, where the bartender stood nervously polishing a glass. "Sorry about the mess," Grizz said quietly, dropping a crumpled bill on the counter. The bartender gave him an apologetic look. "You don't have to go, sir." Grizz shook his head, offering a small, reassuring smile. "It's fine." As he stepped outside, the door creaked closed behind him, and the tension in the bar seemed to release in one collective exhale. The bikers jeered after him, laughing as though they'd won. Bull puffed out his chest and turned back to his table, shouting, "See that? That's what a coward looks like." But Grizz didn't hear them. Outside, the night air was cool against his face as he pulled a simple flip phone from his jacket pocket. He flipped it open, the screen dimly lighting his face as he scrolled through the numbers. He pressed one. The phone rang only once before someone picked up. A gruff voice answered, "Grizz?" "What's going on?" Grizz glanced back at the bar, at the silhouettes of the bikers through the windows. His jaw tightened, just slightly. "You still in town?" "Yeah, you need something?" Grizz hesitated for only a second. "Meet me in 15. Bring the others." The voice on the other end was quiet for a beat, then replied, "Got it." Grizz closed the phone and slipped it back into his jacket. He didn't look back at the bar as he walked down the dirt lot, his boots crunching against the gravel. The shadows stretched long under the yellow glow of the parking lot lights, but Grizz moved with purpose, his expression unreadable. Inside, Bull and the Iron Talons continued their celebration, drinking and boasting loudly as if nothing had happened. They had no idea what kind of man they'd just provoked, nor did they know what was coming. And outside, the calm night lingered, just before the storm. The bar had settled into an uneasy lull after Grizz's departure. Bull and his gang continued to boast, their laughter loud and forced, though a flicker of unease passed between some of the other bikers. Grizz's calm had rattled them in a way they didn't quite understand. "Coward," Bull muttered again, though his voice lacked the earlier fire. He glanced toward the door, almost expecting Grizz to come back, but it remained shut. Good riddance. A few minutes later, the door creaked open, and Bull's grin froze. Grizz walked back into the bar. He moved with the same unshakable calm, his boots thudding softly against the old wood floor as he returned to his seat. The murmurs in the room grew louder as heads turned to watch him. Bull's brows furrowed as he stood, pointing a finger in mock accusation. "Decide to grow a backbone after all?" Bull jeered, though there was a faint edge of confusion in his tone. "Came back for round two?" Grizz didn't respond. He simply leaned back in his chair, folded his arms across his broad chest, and waited. His silence, as always, was more powerful than words. Then the door swung open again. One by one they entered, men of varying ages, some older, some younger, but all carrying themselves with a quiet, unspoken authority. Their military jackets were adorned with patches and medals, each one telling a story of service and sacrifice. These weren't men seeking attention. They were men who had earned their respect through years of hard-won battles. The room fell completely silent. The group moved as though the air parted for them, spreading out across the bar with natural precision. A few took empty tables. Others leaned casually against the walls, their presence heavy. They exchanged nods with Grizz, quiet and knowing, before turning their sharp gazes toward Bull and the iron talons. The bikers fidgeted, their cocky bravado suddenly faltering. "What the hell is this?" Bull said, his voice forced but no longer booming. Grizz stood, his movements deliberate. He gestured toward the group. "These are my brothers," Bull scoffed, trying to play it off, though his voice cracked slightly. "Oh, great. You brought your little friends to back you up?" Grizz took a step forward, his eyes never leaving Bull's. "No, Bull. I didn't bring them to back me up. I brought them here to remind you what real strength looks like." The room was so quiet, you could hear the ceiling fan creaking overhead. "These men," Grizz said, his voice deep and steady, "have served in places you couldn't even point to on a map. They've seen things you can't imagine, lost friends you'll never know. You think respect comes from being the loudest in the room, from throwing your weight around? Number respect is earned through sacrifice, through honor." Bull's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. "I don't need a lecture from you." One of the veterans, an older man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, spoke up. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of years. "Those patches you're mocking, son? They're not for show. Every stitch on this jacket has a story. Some of those stories ended in graves." Another veteran, younger but just as imposing, pointed to Bull's arm. "That tattoo," he said, his tone quiet but firm. "That's a tribute to someone, isn't it?" Bull blinked, caught off guard. He instinctively rubbed the inked skin on his forearm. A cross, with the words, "In memory of R.J.," etched beneath it. "What's it to you?" Bull shot back, though his voice was quieter now. The veteran nodded knowingly. "R.J., you mean Robert James, right? I served with him." Bull froze, his expression shifting from defiance to disbelief. The veteran stepped closer, speaking gently. "Your grandfather saved my unit in Vietnam. He carried 3 men out of a burning jeep under fire and took a bullet doing it. He didn't talk much, but when he did, he spoke of you." Bull's face paled. His gang exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to react. "Your grandfather was a hero," the veteran continued. "A quiet man who never asked for credit. He knew what respect was because he gave it freely, even when it wasn't returned." Grizz stepped closer now, towering over Bull but never raising his voice. "You carry his name and his legacy on your skin, but you disgrace it with your actions. You wear that tattoo, but you don't understand what it means." Bull's shoulders slumped slightly, his gaze falling to the floor. For the first time, he looked unsure, his bluster cracked wide open. The other bikers shifted awkwardly, their confidence fading under the weight of the room. One of the younger veterans spoke up. "You think being a tough guy in a bar makes you something special? It doesn't. Strength isn't about putting people down. It's about holding them up. The silence stretched on for a long beat. Bull's face flushed with shame, though his expression was more conflicted than angry. Finally, he looked back at Grizz, his voice quieter than it had been all night. "I didn't know." Grizz nodded slowly. "Now you do." The silence in the bar lingered, thick and heavy, as Bull stared down at his tattoo, his expression a mix of guilt and realization. The Iron Talons watched their leader quietly, their earlier bravado replaced by an awkward, almost sheepish stillness. The veterans remained where they were, calm and collected, their presence a reminder of something larger than the room itself. Grizz placed a hand on the table, his voice cutting through the silence like a soft rumble of thunder. "Respect isn't something you demand, Bull. It's something you earn. Your grandfather knew that, and I hope one day you'll learn it too." Bull looked up at Grizz, his eyes flashing, but there was no fight left in him. The words hit their mark. After a long pause, he muttered, "I'm sorry." His voice was low, almost reluctant, but it was genuine. The veterans exchanged quiet looks, a silent acknowledgement that the message had sunk in. The other bikers, sensing the shift, followed their leader's example. A few of them mumbled apologies to Grizz and his friends, though they couldn't quite meet their eyes. Grizz, ever dignified, gave them a slight nod. "Don't apologize to me. If you want to honor your grandfather, start by being better than you were yesterday." Bull swallowed hard and gave a slow, reluctant nod. The room felt lighter now, as though a storm had passed. Grizz turned to the bartender and gestured toward the veterans. "Round of drinks for the bar. On us." The bartender nodded gratefully, and murmurs of appreciation rippled through the other patrons. The veterans accepted the drinks with quiet gratitude, raising their glasses in a silent toast to those who'd come before. As Grizz turned to leave, he paused beside Bull. Resting a firm hand on the younger man's shoulder, he leaned in and said quietly, "You've got a choice, son. Carry on like this, or honor the man who came before you." Bull didn't respond, but his eyes flickered with something close to understanding. Outside, the cool night air greeted Grizz and his brothers as they stepped into the parking lot. The rumble of motorcycles soon filled the silence, and one by one, the veterans rode off into the dark, their presence lingering like the echo of a lesson learned. Days later, at the memorial service for the fallen, Grizz stood near the back, watching as a few unexpected faces appeared. Bull and two other Iron Talons walked up quietly, standing in silence as the names of the fallen were read. Bull's head was bowed, his hands clasped in front of him. Grizz said nothing. He didn't need to. Some lessons didn't need to be spoken twice. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey of respect, legacy, and redemption. Grizz's story reminds us that strength isn't about power or intimidation. It's about honor, sacrifice, and standing for something greater than ourselves. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to leave a comment and let us know your thoughts. And we'd love to hear where you're listening from. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss another story that challenges, inspires, and stays with you long after it's over. We'll be back soon with more tales of courage, transformation, and unexpected moments that change everything. Thank you for being part of our Hopeful Horizon community. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay humble, and always strive to earn your respect.